Welcome everyone to our webinar on shock mobility displacements in South Asia. We are Calcutta Research Group as well as the South Asia Network for Communication, Displacement and Migration, the SAN-CDM. The SAN-CDM is a network, an interdisciplinary network of media persons, community members, researchers, activists interested in the question of migration in and from and to South Asia. We came together with the South Asia consultations held early in 2022, during which we discussed what are the problems and possibilities of reporting about migration in South Asia. We held the South Asia consultations and prepared an action plan, out of which emerged this network, interdisciplinary network, of which several of you are part. We have been regularly hosting online discussions, webinars, as well as physical conferences. In fact, two this year, earlier in February and then again in November in Nepal, in which we have tried to solidify the network. We've brought more and more people within the fold of the network. And we are very happy to see that some of the past participants from the consultations, online discussions, and the two network conferences, as well as the regular media training programs that we have been carrying out, have joined us today. So welcome to everyone. This work is carried out by the Calcutta Research Group, which is a more than 25 years old organization specializing in issues of migration, forced migration, refugeehood, and statelessness, especially in the South Asia, but also in the global context. This work is supported by the Deutsche Welle Academy, which is the media development wing of the BW. We are very happy to have today with us our friend Bharat Bhushan, who's a senior journalist, a member of Calcutta Research Group, as well as somebody who has been working to build a bridge between academic and popular media writing through a platform called 360 Info. Bharat has been integral to this project for the last 2 years, and we are very glad that Bharat has, as usual, kindly consented to chair this discussion. So over to you now, Bharat.
Thank you, Samantha. So the topic today, as Samantha has already told you, for this SAN-CDM webinar is shock mobility, displacement in South Asia. Shock mobility, most of you perhaps already know, refers to the sudden movement of people due to acute disruptions. It could be tsunami, cyclone, earthquake, war, pandemic, economic crisis, or any other unexpected or unpredictable displacement. Because of such shocks, people are forced to migrate from their homes in search of security and survival elsewhere. But today, we will not focus on these all the aspects of shock migration. We will limit ourselves this evening to conflict-induced shock migration and its depiction in the media. The dimensions of this problem are and have been huge in South Asia. Just to remind you, the partition of India in 1947 was such a shock that it led to 14 million refugees. The Russian invasion of Afghanistan and subsequent Taliban takeover of Afghanistan led to 8 million Afghan refugees. Of these, 3.2 million were displaced within the country itself. Burma used to be in South Asia, although today it sees itself as part of East Asia. But because of violence against Rohingyas there, Rohingya refugees have been pushed out of the country. About 1.2 million are outside the country. More are outside the country than inside Burma today. They're in Bangladesh, India, Thailand, Malaysia, and elsewhere. Pakistan is facing a double displacement because of a shock announcement of sending back undocumented Afghan refugees. So they had been displaced from Afghanistan first, now they'll be displaced from Pakistan, about 1.5 million of them. In Nepal, the Maoist insurgency led to displacement of about 200,000 people, many of whom have not returned back to their homes as yet. In Sri Lanka, the 25-year-old civil war between the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam and the Sinhala government or Sri Lankan government led to more than 1 million people being displaced both internally and externally. Ethnic conflict in Manipur more recently led to 6,000 forced displacements. 60,000 out of a total population of just 3.3 million. So that's almost 1/5 of the population was displaced. There have been other conflict-related displacements too. Communal riots between Hindus and Muslims in Gujarat, ethnic conflicts in Balochistan, border conflict in Kashmir continues to lead to displacement of these people living along the border or the line of control, and displacement of Hindu minorities in in Bangladesh. So today we'll discuss how the media told the story of some of these displacements and what it did right and what it did wrong. We will ask, how were these displacements portrayed in the media? What narratives did the media create about them? What should the media have done, and what is its responsibility in such situations? And in what way, in reporting of conflict displacement, is the reportage affected by government policies such as internet shutdowns, not allowing journalists to travel, asking them to get curfew passes, restricting their movement, etc.? And how much is it affected by the media's own bias, where the media, after all, comes from the same society which has experienced this shock? So how does their own ethnic identity, national identity, regional identity play a role in their reportage? To discuss all this, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Mr. Ziaur Rahman from Pakistan. He's a freelance journalist and researcher and has mainly been writing for the New York Times, Nikki Asia, Voice of America, among a host of other news platforms. His area of interest include security issues, insurgencies, migration, and religion. We have with us an eminent human rights activist from Manipur, Bablu Loingtongbom. He's the director of Human Rights Alert, an organization that works to monitor, investigate, and report human rights violations, including attacks on human rights defenders. We have with us Mohammad Feroz from Sri Lanka. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Mohammad is a journalist based in Sri Lanka. He's the editor of the Sri Lankan Tamil newspaper called Vidivelli, as well as of Vidivelli web portal. We have with us an eminent human rights activist from Nepal, Som Narula. He's a program officer for the human rights portfolio at the Alliance for Social Dialogue, ASD in Kathmandu. He's also been associated with South Asia Forum for Human Rights in Nepal. We have with us my old friend Jayanta Roy Chaudhary. Jayanta is a well-known Indian editor and radio broadcaster. Till recently, he was the Eastern India Chief for Press Trust of India, based in Kolkata. Prior to this, he was the business editor of New Indian Express and the Telegraph. He's also a former General Secretary of the Commonwealth Journalists Association, an international body of journalists. So now I begin by inviting Ziaur Rahman to talk about the subject. All of you have about 7 to 8 minutes max. So please limit yourself to the broad questions of the role of media in reporting a conflict displacement.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is a very timely discussion because Pakistan has been carrying out a very huge takedown on Afghan unaccompanied refugees. Pakistan has been hosting them for over the past 4 decades. But as you said, suddenly, like in September, Pakistan announced that we will basically report all unaccompanied refugees, which the government claimed that there are 1.7 unaccompanied people living in the Pakistan. So, issue is that I agree with you that you know that Pakistan has been facing several internal and external conflict issues. When we have this military operation in some areas, we have this large displacement because of the operation, and now sometimes we have natural disasters. But after the fall of Kabul in August 2021, we also seen a new wave of refugees. So I'm just giving a background of the refugees that there was many waves of refugees towards Pakistan from Afghanistan since 1979, since Soviet came to Afghanistan, and then first it was the wave. Then we have seen that civil war between civil Mujahideen group supported by the Iran and Pakistan. Then we have seen the rise of Taliban, and then after 9/11, US and NATO came and they toppled the Taliban government, and then we have seen another wave of refugees. And recently, in August 2021, when Taliban recaptured Afghanistan because of this Doha agreement, so then we have seen the 600,000 new refugees. So in the beginning, Pakistan was very optimistic that now the new government, the Taliban government, will help us in curbing the Pakistani military found centuries in Afghanistan. But within the 2 years, we have seen that there is a rise of terrorism inside Pakistan, and the Taliban government was not ready to expel the Pakistani militant, particularly the TDP militants. So then, because of this frustration and these things, Pakistan decided to expel these refugees as a part of its strategy to pressure the Taliban regime to expel. What's happening is on the ground that we have seen that not only about the Afghan refugees, but about all stateless communities and peace community all over the world. We have seen the stereotyping against them. So when the Pakistan launched these crackdown, so we have seen that the media has played a very very mixed role. So the English media, they played a very positive role because they basically covered what's happening with the refugees, what is the government policy. So because we don't have any democratic government, we have caretaker government because election will be held in February 8th, 2014. So there was some criticism by the international INGOs that they have only given 28 days to 1.7 million refugees to go back to the country. But we've seen that the local media, like the Urdu media and the TV channels, they basically have played a very negative role. They have many reasons because they are not sensitized how to cover refugees or IDPs or stateless communities. Number two, they also they have own biases. The Pakistani media is also passing through its own difficult times because of we have seen that many. So we have seen that Pakistani media has been also have their own issues. Several newspapers have been shut down, or they have cut short their pages. The TV channels has been fired many reporters because of economic crunch. But despite it, we don't. So there's big crisis going on in the country, but we don't see any informed commentary. You can say very independent commentary on the refugees in the Urdu language media, which is basically predominant media. And it is the reason that there is no voices. What's happening with them? There's no voices of refugees in the media. Like what's happening with them? So there is more restrictions. The government is saying that we are only expelling undocumented refugees, but we've also seen that they're also harassing and targeting the documented refugees. Like we have these two documents. One is called a proof of registration card, and another is Afghan citizenship card, which is given by the Pakistani government in the collaboration of UNHCR. And also, we have a very large number of these 600,000 people who arrived after the fall of Kabul. They are journalists, they are minority activists, they are former security officials, they are LGBT activists. They are basically a vulnerable community, and the Pakistani state doesn't know their situation because they cannot differentiate between which one is at-risk population and which is economic migrant and which is undocumented. So there is a big things going on. We have seen very good commentaries in the international media, but because Pakistan has very low literacy ratio, people doesn't read English newspapers, so they mainly follow the Urdu media, Urdu newspapers, and Urdu TV channel in which we have of these negative news against the refugee community. And also there was one more thing, that when the Pakistan announced that we will expel all undocumented refugees, so you may know that Pakistan, particularly Karachi, has a very significant Bengali and Rohingya population. But when we report, if we've seen that they're only expelling Afghan refugees as a part of their strategy to force Taliban administration. So in this situation in which there's a very huge population, almost 1.7, they're undocumented, and 1.4 are documented. So they're around 3 to 4 million people, very huge people, and they have their own issues. Because of crackdown, the families have been splitting. A person who is living in Pakistan for 3 to 4 decades, how can he sell his properties and his assets within the 28 days? And also, the children who was born in Pakistan who didn't see Afghanistan for a single day, where will they go? Because they don't have anything there. So I think it was very right time for media to do some humanitarian-based and some ground reality-based reporting, but unfortunately, we didn't see it. There was also the role of the state, which also prohibited media to some extent to limit reporting from these things because it is a part of the so-called national interest. So yeah, so it is the main things.
Thank you, Zia, for your informative presentation, and you kept yourself well within time. And thank you for alerting us to 3 or 4 issues which I would like to flag. You said Urdu media particularly is not sensitized to covering refugees, and there are biases in the media itself. The voices of refugees don't appear in the media, and no discussion of impact of government policies on refugees. And you also talked about government policies being unclear about which refugees they're targeting, documented, undocumented, economic refugees, political refugees, etc. Thank you. And we'll hope that these will be taken up in the discussion. Now I invite Bablu to speak on conflict displacement in Manipur. Bablu, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm doing this from my phone and I'm having difficulties showing it, but I'll share it later. My presentation is focused primarily on the Burmese refugees coming from across the border, even though also it's quite clear that the internal conflict now is displacing about 60,000 people, and the condition for them is particularly bad. But the movement of people from across the border from Myanmar has been attributed by the official as the root cause of these conflict as well. So I think it is important to give a little highlight on that. I mean, just to give a historical background, refugees from Myanmar is not new. In fact, the first big wave came in 1942 after the Japanese invasion, where 500,000 people had to work from Myanmar across Manipur to South Asia or to India now. Similarly, about 40,000 came in 1962, and in when there was this nationalization and the Indians were pushed out from Myanmar, 40,000 people walked through Manipur. And similarly, in 88, about 1 lakh population refugees went through Manipur. 2021, again, during this coup, about both Manipur and Mizoram is estimated to be roughly about 50,000, but in the recent kind of escalation, things seems to have changed quite a lot. Unfortunately, the border between India and Myanmar, starting from the tri-junction of Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar to India, Burma, and China, is one of the most unregulated borders of India. And therefore, there is a large-scale movement of population for many, many decades. And many people view the present, I mean, this is a totally open border, except for a few places where there's fencing. These are only border passes. And in fact, 16 kilometer on both sides are considered as free movement regime. So the administration or the control border movement of people have been always a very difficult situation. The Manipur State Population Commission have come out with some figure showing how there is a sudden increase in certain ethnic population, disturbing the ethnic balance. Figure of how Meiteis in 130 years have gone from 1 lakh to 12 lakh, Nagas from 60,000 to 6 lakhs, whereas Kukis have increased from 17,000 to 4.5 lakhs. So these are the background, and the response from the government of India has been like anywhere else, quite ambivalent. And after the coup has happened in February in 2021, the Union Home Ministry have came out in March 2021 itself, not to allow any illegal immigrants, not to provide food and shelter, which was defied by the Mizoram government, but the Manipur government followed it even more strictly than it was envisaged. Yeah, the Manipur government in response also formed a cabinet subcommittee on the 16th of February 2023. And on 14th of April, it came out with a report identifying that in 4 districts, there are 2,187 illegal immigrants from Myanmar, which was documented by them. But very soon after the disclosure of this information, Manipur went into this ethnic conflict, which again resulted into internal displacement of anywhere between, officially they said something like 57,000, but if you count the people who have gone out of Manipur to other states in India, it can well reach about 70,000 people. But of late, even as recent as yesterday, Hindustan Times reported new arrival of some 2,200 Myanmar nationals in Kamjong district, and therefore the situation is continuing. And about 167 Myanmar nationals are still detained in the foreigner detention center in Manipur. Honestly, I have not done much in terms of reporting. I didn't realize that the emphasis is on reporting. But just to give a very quick overview, what is characteristic of the problem here is a total lack of any institution to deal with these issues. Even though this is a very long-term problem of refugees, the Foreigner Registration Office, which is usually the one that handles refugee from neighboring countries, is non-existent. Officially in paper it exists, but very often it is non-functional. The Myanmar refugees are being asked to be dealt by the UNHCR, and UNHCR is also not given access to the territory in the northeast, and so there is a big protection gap here. And even though some of the judiciary, the High Court of Manipur have come out with some good judgments saying that the principle of non-reforma, not to push out people, should be read as part of Article 21 of the Constitution. Unfortunately, the same judgment has been challenged by the central government, and the matter is pending in the Supreme Court. So the ambivalence has created a lot of problem. And again, the media reporting has been very sparse. Again, the actual condition of the refugee camps or the IDP camps are not reflected sufficiently. The humanitarian needs are acute, and only even the local reporters who can access them the quality of reporting is very, very shallow. And also the problem is international media or even national media's access is very limited. Let me stop there. I'm happy to come and be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bablu. Thank you for highlighting the total lack of institutional mechanisms in Manipur for dealing with Myanmar refugees, which the Manipur government claims are the cause of this ethnic conflict. I mean, that can be debated. I'm sure you know all the arguments. But we are on the media. So you said the media reporting has been sparse and shallow. The condition of refugee camps is not reported, and access local media and national media to these refugees is limited. I hope people who are familiar with Manipur and the way the Manipur government has harassed journalists will ask you a few questions during the discussion. Thank you very much. Now I invite Mohammad Feroz from Sri Lanka. Mohammad is a journalist based in Sri Lanka. As I said, he's editor of the Sri Lankan Tamil newspaper Vidiveli. Mohammed, the floor is yours. Where is he? Is he there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm audible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Before I begin, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the Calcutta Research Group and the South Asian Network for SAN-CDM for extending this invitation. I would like to draw your attention to the conflicts that have emerged in Sri Lanka and the role played by the media in reporting the displacements that have resulted from them. Since achieving independence from Britain in 1948, Sri Lanka experienced two major armed conflicts that effectively impacted on the whole country. The Janata Vimukti Peramuna JVP, a leftist organization involving mainly Sinhalese youth, led two insurgencies in the southern part of the country, first in 1971 and later between 1987 to 1990. The other major armed conflict to impact the Sri Lankan population was the protracted war between the Sri Lankan government and the liberation of Tamil Eelam Tigers, a militant organization aiming to create an autonomous Tamil state in the eastern and northern province of the country. The armed conflict, which started in 1983, came to an end in May 2009 with the military defeat of the LTTE by Sri Lankan armed forces. During the 30 years of prolonged conflict, more than 100,000 of people, all ethnicities, are estimated to have died, while hundreds of thousands have been injured. The 3 decades of conflict was also the key driver of internal and external displacements in Sri Lanka, displacing approximately 1 million people at its peak in 2001, mainly from the northern and eastern province. There are also an estimated 73,000 Sri Lankan refugees living in 112 camps in southern India, state of Tamil Nadu, with a further 34,000 outside of the camps. However, these numbers can vary as refugee population tend to grow in size and has a high level of undocumented migration. Throughout the period of conflict, the numbers of Sri Lankan asylum seekers to countries such as UK, Canada, and Australia has been increasing, with their irregular migration contributing especially to mental health problems. When discussing conflicts in Sri Lanka, the predominant focus often centers on the 3 decades of civil war. Nevertheless, it is essential to recognize that both the periods preceding the following the war have been marked by diverse conflicts, each accompanied by its own set of displacement. 1958, 1977, and 1983 witnessed outbreaks of anti-Tamil riots. Also, post-war incidents of ethnic and sectarian violence against Muslims, notably in 2014, 2018, and 2019 also led to reported displacement in Sri Lanka. As I mentioned earlier, in the final phase of the war in 2009, the largest number of people in history had to displace. This number is estimated to be around 300,000. Next to this, the largest recorded displacement in Sri Lanka was the overnight expulsion of about 75,000 Muslims from the northern province by the LTTE. It has now been 33 years since this incident took place. Internally displaced persons in Sri Lanka faced, and in some cases continue to face, a range of complex challenges. Major challenges encountered by these IDPs include displacement leading to the loss of homes, inadequate shelters, restricted access to basic services, economic hardships, psychosocial trauma, issues related to the land and property, prolonged displacement, and security concerns. At this juncture, the question emerges regarding the role of the media in addressing the challenges faced by internally displaced people. As a journalist and the editor of a community newspaper, I must assert that the mainstream media in Sri Lanka has fallen short in fulfilling this responsibility. It is fair to say that the media in Sri Lanka is polarized. Throughout the war period, predominant media coverage primarily featured statements from the government's cabinet spokesperson and the military spokesperson only. In particular, the majority of Sinhalese residing in the southern regions formed their perception of the war primarily from these messages. Essentially, the government controlled the information flow, permitting only news that align with its interest to reach the public. During this time, there was a significant imposition of strict censorship on private media outlets. On the other hand, channels to communicate the genuine issues faced by the affected Tamil people were not allowed. Currently, we learn about what is happening in Gaza instantly through social media. However, This opportunity did not exist during the war in Sri Lanka. If social media has existed then, the real situation of people displaced by war in Sri Lanka would have been revealed to the world. The media in Sri Lanka approached the issue of displaced people solely from a humanitarian standpoint. Conversely, there seems to be a lack of understanding from a human rights perspective. This is also one of the main points. Muslims expelled from the north in 1990 have not been fully settled yet. They still live in refugee camps in Puttalam district in northwestern province. Although they are willing to settle and live in their own lands again, the government has not taken steps for this. The mainstream media of the country is oblivious to the problems of these people. This is why they are called the forgotten people by civil society organizations. I do not intend to accuse the Sri Lankan media of completely hiding the problems of displacement people, but my concern is that they could have reported more deeply and consistently. Thank you.
Thank you for that absolutely brilliant and concise presentation, Mohammed. I mean, your indictment of Sri Lankan media is quite amazing for a lot of us. That the mainstream media, you said, has fallen short. It's polarized. That we knew. Those of us who reported the war with LGT saw that firsthand. Media carries only announcements of the government, and the government controls the media. Genuine issues of Tamil refugees or even other refugees, especially, I mean, I didn't know about the expulsion of 75,000 Muslims from North by LTT, and that they are still living as displaced people, that none of this got reported, and lack of understanding of human rights aspects of displacement. So thank you very much for that absolutely brilliant presentation. Now I invite my friend Som Narula from Nepal to talk about these issues.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Basar. This is I'm honored to be here to speak on conflict and displacement issues. I think Basar, you have already highlighted the conflict related displacement in Nepal. So there are others displacement as well, like in conflict in 1996 to 2006. There's a large number of people got displaced due to the conflict, and numbers of people, some of them they have returned, but still the people who came to the city and migrated due to the armed conflict, they are in city areas of in Kathmandu, Western Nepalganj, other city areas. There are different reasons why, because of the they moved from the very remote areas to city centers. So it's sometimes they became quite difficult to going back because of the conflict. They lost their house, and then also some of the people is still not able to get back the properties seized by the armed groups. So that's why they did not going back to their home. So I think that's the whole conflict related displacement. And conflict related displacement is much more other aspect has been discussed on transitional justice issues, like just like torture, or other killing and others. So the media's attention mostly on other aspects, not focusing on the internal displacement, how it is going to be compensated who those people who got displaced due to conflict. So ultimately it is considered is not a very important issues whole in whole discussion on transitional justice. So I think that's the very how to sensitize and bring the voices of the internally displaced people in the process of making the transitional justice process more comprehensive. So I think that's the media also need to be covered, as well as the other civil society organization also. I think at the end of the conflict, the government has given a small amount of money, like I think it's 30,000 rupees to getting back to their home. So I think that's the only aspect. I think that the people who got displaced receive the compensation amount. That is very minimal amount, right? It's not even like about $300 or something like that. So that point need to be discussed and resolve some of the issues on internal displacement and conflict. The second one is also like related with the refugees. The media's attention has not been drawn. Like if they also report the refugee issues, uh, uh, earlier there used to be some kind of humanitarian assistance and other aspect, returning back to home. I think that kind of sympathy and the people used to raise. But nowadays they certainly somebody is coming in Nepal, like in terms of Rohingya and others, it's bias and some kind of fabricated kind of stories they comes in medias. So that makes also vulnerable for the refugees coming from different difficult time regions. So I think that's the another aspect how the post displacement been reporting been done in medias, as well as the others aspect of displacement, like like climate related or other natural disasters also. The stories becomes only the when the people lost their life and say that it becomes the news for the newspapers. Otherwise the hardly I think they will cover the livelihood and displacement related issues. uh, in a recent example, like in far west, like Jumla, after the earthquake, large number of people, they lost their houses, and they got displaced. But when the people started dying due to the cold, then only that attention has come into the media. So I think that's the how the media see the reportings, comes in headline and others. So I think that was what I observed in reporting and in related to the internal displacement. Then lastly, like the uh, policies and other lacunas, even and during the internal conflict time, the government of Nepal, they adopted the internal guidelines on internal displacement. So I think after the comprehensive peace occurred, it's 19, then after that nobody raises on issues of that guidelines. So I think that guidelines gives some kind of benchmark to assess the needs and identify the people's what kind of support they require, immediate support, help, and institutional mechanism to address those needs. So for the people, like the increasing, like every years, whether it's been conflict or climate change or natural disaster, the number has been increasing, uh, uh, increasing in terms of displacement, people getting displaced. So I think those kind of policy institutional arrangement is essential to address immediately for the people internally displaced people. So that much I can share right now, Bharat sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Som. You've emphasized how media's attention is really not on internal displacement, although a lot of these internally displaced people, displaced due to the Maoist insurgency, have not been able to go back. That's assuming that a lot of them in these cities want to go back. So you made a distinction that some have lost their skills, some want to stay in the cities, but those who want to go back, who have properties there, their seized properties have not been returned by the Maoists. You said that there's no discussion of how they will be compensated, and the compensation that's been given is inadequate. And you also argued that media doesn't address the question of how transitional justice can be made comprehensive, and how they can get the voices of these displaced people into the public sphere. You said no media sympathy for refugees. I hope during the discussion you'll tell us why that is so. Why that is so? Why is there no sympathy in the media for? You talked about Rohingyas. There aren't too many Rohingya refugees in Nepal compared to, let's say, Bangladesh, of course, as the largest, but even compared to India, there aren't too many. But the small number that is there, you're saying the media plays up to the dominant biases of Nepalese society against these refugees. And that's something, again, I would like you to throw some light on during the discussion. Now, this Nepal government's guidelines on internally displaced people on assessing their needs and support required, etc. I wish you had said some more on that. What are these guidelines and how are they inadequate? But I leave that again to the discussion. But thank you very much for a very enriching presentation. And now I invite our last panelist, Jayanta Roy Chaudhary, to address the subject. I'm told, Jayanta, you're going to talk about displacements in Manipur, or is it some other displacement or shock displacement that you're going to talk about?
No, Manipur as well as Mizoram and a little bit of Tripura. So basically the problem in Manipur, of course, my friend earlier had said as that one is the Burmese or the Myanmarese refugees who have been coming to Manipur, but that is a small part of the problem. The real problem, of course, is the ethnic conflict between the Meiteis and the Kuki-Zo people, not just the Kukis. There are a number of other tribes who are also involved in that conflict. And this has seen a complete ethnic cleansing from the valley and from the hills. Virtually, there is no Zo people now living in the valley, and there are virtually no Meiteis living in the hills. We had a lot of problems in the reportage of this entire issue. PTI, being the national news agency, was obviously very keen to cover it on a day-to-day basis. The main problem was, of course, twofold. One, we had the main stringer that we had in Imphal, the main correspondent that we had in Imphal was a Meitei, and he was unable to get the whole picture, partly because he was unable to travel out, partly because there was an informal ban on reportage within Imphal, and there was a cartelization of news. A certain point of view was being given by virtually every newspaper and every news agency. The same point of view was being given. So we had to depend a lot on the Assam Rifles officers whom we were contacting directly from Calcutta. We also sent reporters from Guwahati and Calcutta in order to get on-the-spot stories. We also hired someone in Churachandpur so that we could get the other side of the picture. But then resolving the two pictures from Imphal and Churachandpur, we needed people to go from Calcutta and Guwahati, as well as to ask the Assam Rifles for the official version. So it was a bit of guesswork. It was a bit of hard work. We did it, but there were certainly a lot of lacunae. And as Bharat pointed out earlier in his own report, the ban on internet meant that we could not, very often, we could not get out news on time, and news was always delayed, almost always delayed for a very, very long time. The root causes of the ethnic conflict, we tried to give that as part of the background in every story, which is, of course, which as we saw it were twofold. One, of course, is a long-term animosity between two tribes, but more than that, the displacement of a lot of people from the forest areas of the Churachandpur and other tribal dominated districts, which really started the conflict. And then, of course, the last straw was the seeming order, which seemed to suggest that some kind of a scheduled tribe status would be given to one community. This was a very, very difficult conflict to cover for us, and we were under a lot of pressure from a lot of areas in this conflict. The other story is, of course, Mizoram. Mizoram is actually home to the largest number of refugees right now in the northeast. Many of them from Myanmar, Chian refugees from Myanmar, whom the Mizos have really looked after very well. They have also looked after a lot of refugees from Manipur itself. Uh, Given their limited resources, they have done a fantastic job of it. And this has been done totally by the civil societies, not by the state government or by the central government. From Bangladesh too, a lot of Zo people have become refugees in Mizoram, and at the same time, Chakmas have started streaming into both Mizoram and into Tripura. So these were smaller, lesser reported conflicts, but they were there, and we tried to cover it as much as possible. Uh, the problem with the reportage out of Mizoram was that we were one of the few who were reporting. Most of the foreign news agencies were unable to perhaps get to Mizoram because of various permissions that they required. So they also had to depend a lot on us, and we had to find a lot of questions from them, which we then relayed on to our own correspondents on the field, and I think we tried to do a fairly good job. Uh, but not that everything was honky dory. We all know about the Bru tribals from Mizoram who were internally displaced, who were again shock refugees who came out several years back. Their rehabilitation in Tripura has been a problem area. I myself visited their camps. They have been given space to live. They have been even given some kind of houses which were built for them. But there is no possibility of giving them any livelihood or any long-term livelihood. This is another tragedy which is happening. Those people are being supported right now on dole, though that dole has been stopped. So this again is another problem. The first is the shock, initial shock, which these refugees face of having been displaced from wherever they have been living for generations. And then once they come to a new place, how do they live on? That is another bigger shock. But that is, of course, true for climate refugees, for all kinds of refugees. So I won't take up much more time, and I will wait for the question and answer session in case anyone has anything to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanta. That was concise and brilliant, absolutely, in capturing the shock conflict related displacement in Manipur and Mizoram, and to some extent in Tripura. Um, I'm glad you're saying all the things that you said, because I can't say them. I said it in the report of the Editors Guild, and I'm facing 5 criminal cases, and my cases are before the Supreme Court. So as long as the case is not decided, I will not say much. But I'm glad you said the following things, which I agree with. One, that reporters could not travel out. It was difficult. When I went, I found the journalists wearing bulletproof vests with press written on it. And when I and my colleagues from the Editors Guild wanted to go to Churachandpur, they said, "Oh, go buy yourself a bulletproof vest first." So, excuse me. So I said, "Why? And where do you buy them?" They said, "Oh, they're available for what, 9,000 rupees." And they also tell you the range: AK-47, 150 meters, this kind of rifle, so many meters. And the cost goes up depending on how much protection you want. And it's openly available in the market in Imphal. So I've reported wars, including in Afghanistan. I've been tear gassed in Nepal, but I've never reported with a bulletproof vest. But those were the conditions. And luckily, we went without bulletproof vests, nothing happened. But traveling was very difficult. Yes, there was an informal ban. Journalists were monitored. There was cartelization. One of the defamation cases against us, the Editors Guild of India, is 2 of them actually, by journalist bodies based in Imphal, because we said they were biased and there was cartelization. There was homogenization of news as journalists got divided on ethnic lines. So this was not true only of the Meitei journalists who dominate the media in Imphal, but equally true of Kuki journalists who did not have their own publications, but were feeding other journalists from Churachandpur, Kangpokpi districts. It's interesting that Jayanto, as editor of PTI in Kolkata at that time, admits that they were forced to hire along ethnic lines. You had to hire a Kuki journalist in Churachandpur so that you would get the version of the Kukis as opposed to the Meitei versions, which was available in the Imphal newspapers. It's also true that actually the Assam Rifles, which operates under the Indian Army, their version became the official version or the neutral version, because they were the only people at that time who were saying, we are here upholding the Indian constitution. We are not cookies, we are not Meiteis, we don't serve any tribe, we serve the constitution of India. But the fact is, it was the army's version, and because the other versions were so biased, so homogenized, so ethnically colored, that this was the only version that was, let's say, somewhat more credible. The ban on internet, which Jayanto mentioned, this besides delaying news, the impact it had was, even if those Meitei journalists or those cookie journalists who wanted to check each other's versions or wanted to feed into each other's stories to make the stories more comprehensive, give all aspects of it, couldn't do so. And physically couldn't travel without being killed. So internet ban had a terrible effect. It was lifted for journalists after a while, but it was very heavily monitored initially. Mizoram is a shining example of how the government there opened its coffers and its heart to refugees from Myanmar and the Kuki-Zomi refugees from Manipur. But that was also done along ethnic lines, because they were of the same ethnicity. It wasn't done because they had a great respect for human rights and for refugees and their rights, etc. It was, again, spurred by ethnic loyalties. Now, ethnicity and ethnic conflicts are important in Northeast because they, ethnicity is politics. These are tribal states. If the population of one group goes up, politics of the entire state changes. Bru tribals were also mentioned, and Chakmas were mentioned too, but I won't go into great details there because it, a lot of people won't even know who the Chakmas are and who the Brus are. But basically, the problem is that there is an ethnic conflict, and in the Northeast, because of ethnic conflict, there are refugees. I will stop myself there, and we'll open the floor to questions, and I might come back at the end to summarize a little bit and make a few suggestions. So the floor is now open to questions. I think you can write the questions in the chat box, and somebody will read them out, because I don't know whether I'll have access to them or not.
I will read them out. We have a few questions already. So while others are getting ready, we will read the ones that we have. We have two comments from Motiur Rahman, who
Yes, yes, Samata, sorry to interrupt you. Where says that because our Pakistani colleague has to go.
He's left. He has left already.
He's already left. Okay, it's all right.
But he told us that we have senior journalist Mr. Tahir Khan here. If we want to have questions addressed to Mr. Tahir Khan, we could do that. I don't know whether Tahir Saab knows that, but Zia advised us to ask Tahir Saab questions. Should I read the questions out now?
Yes,
yeah.
Please.
Yeah. So we have two comments from Motiur Rahman. Motiur Rahman has been working with bringing the dead bodies of migrant workers from West Bengal, from places like Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Kuwait, etc. He single-handedly manages to get quite a few dead bodies back when they die during their course of work. So Motiur has a specific comment. He asks, many of the migrant workers of India's West Bengal who are going to Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Kuwait are facing problems. Migrant workers' families are particularly upset by fake phone calls, but there is no reflection of anything of this kind in the news. And he's saying that while they face so many problems, there is no impact on national media of this kind of migration, which could be considered a form of forced migration. Then we have two questions for Mohammad Fairuz. One question is from me. I am asking, what role does the community Tamil media play in highlighting issues of conflict-induced displacement? And is there a possibility of connecting with Tamil language media in India? How does the refugee community in India respond? And there is another question along the same lines, in which Niruka Sanjivani is asking, what kind of role has been played by the Sri Lankan Tamil media in socializing the news or narratives related to the repatriation of Tamil refugees from Tamil Nadu to their original places. So both of these are to Mohammad Fairuz. And I have a question for Bablu as well. So, which is basically what you had already talked to us about, Bharat, that about how did the Manipur government, how has the Manipur government been reacting to national journalists who indeed could reach? I think Nasreen has a question. Nasreen's hand was up.
So can we stop here and let these people address these questions, and then you can read out others. So Mohammad Fairuz first.
Thank you for the questions. I think also these are very important aspects actually I have to mention in my presentation. The first question is talking about what role played by the local Tamil community media, right? About this the refugees who are currently living in India. Before that, actually the Tamil media, as I already mentioned, the Sri Lankan media is polarized, right? So the Sinhala media reporting only in the Sinhala language. So the Sinhala people only can understand that. Tamil people can't understand it. And at the same time, Tamil media reporting only Tamil community issues. So the Tamil community only the reading. Sinhala peoples can't understand that. That is the main problem here. So but Tamil media, yes, of course, they are reporting about their local and international refugees crisis. Which means who are living in India as well. Their issues. We have our correspondent as well as there. So we are getting their news items they were publishing. But the problem is actually this problem to be heard by the government, who are majority they are speaking in Sinhala language or in English. So when Tamil media is reporting in Tamil, they couldn't understand. So that's the main problems here. We couldn't connect, so we couldn't send the ground message to the higher authorities. So the Tamil media who in India, yes, they are reporting, but not because of if there are any incidents happening, they are immediately reporting that. Only that. So this we can call that the one-time reporting. They are not continuously concerned about the refugees issues in India. So you are asking about, is there any possibilities to connect yes, of course, even in our company also we are together with some Indian newspapers. We are getting news from them and we are sharing them. So I think yes, we can connect with them. We have enough people and also the reporters. And the next question from this Niruka Sanjeevani asking about this, what media role played to the repatriation of Tamil refugees from Tamil Nadu to their original places. Actually, this is a big issue. The people who are now currently living in India, they are not willing to come back to Sri Lanka, right? You know, I don't know, even though the last, after this economic crisis, the people, even though they had the idea to come back to Sri Lanka, now they are not ready to come. Most of the people now, they are illegally by boat. They are now, even the last year, I have another data, the more than 50 to 70 incidents reported. The people from Tamil speaking people, they reached India by boat illegally because of this economic crisis. So I didn't touch the economic crisis part because of this. We are focusing only the conflict aspects. So the thing is, Sri Lankan media, they are not talking about this the repatriation of Tamil refugees to Sri Lanka because of this issue. Actually, please don't misunderstand. I'm blaming the Sinhala media or the mainstream media. Even Tamil media also, we have lack of we also lack of facilities or lack of reporting on this displaced issue. I also agreed on that point. Hope my answer is clear.
Yeah.
Great. Well, of course, the challenge for people from the national media who ends up in Imphal is access. How to go on both sides of the camp, and the second is how much openness will there be. I mean, in any situation where there's so much of polarization, ethnic polarization, there is always an open narrative and a hidden narrative. A hidden narrative that is spoken only among the ethnic communities, which is not spoken out. So to get to the hidden narrative is always a challenge. It requires time and to sink in and to have a certain rapport which very often, again, most of the national media do not have. So it's more, people call it parachuting, and then in 2 days you have to file a story. So you are not able to get down to the bottom of the story very often. But what is even more dangerous, I think, over and above this open narrative and the hidden narrative and reaching to the hidden narrative, is the way in which the Manipur state government has now tried to control the narrative completely. So even the liberal fringe within the Meitei community is very, very difficult to express themselves in the present condition, because one, the state have taken a clear position of being a Meitei protagonist, and within the Meitei protagonist, again, they have erased the independent voices and the civil society. Some journalists who initially tried to report them are getting reprisal, subtle pressures through various vigilante groups, and some of us as human rights activists trying to be vocal to give an alternative perspective from among the not only Meitei but as a Manipur kind of a concern, are getting very serious reprisals. I mean, my house was vandalized on the 5th of October, precisely because we are giving a narrative which is different from the way the Manipur government wants to present. So the narrative control is almost complete today. So it is not just about ethnicity, but I think it's also a certain state control over what is the information that goes, what is the narrative that goes, and add to it is also the whole internet ban and how they have been. I mean, our present chief minister was a former media person himself, and he probably knows how the dynamics of how to control the narratives much better than earlier chief ministers that we have seen. Let me stop at that.
So, Bablu, I have a follow-up question, because this term parachute journalism comes up in all these conflicts, especially in the Manipur conflict.
Yeah.
And it's used to block any journalists coming from outside or delegitimizing their reports, saying that you know nothing. So this kind of nativism in journalistic reportage, where does one draw the line? By this logic, the Ukraine conflict should be is best reported by Ukrainian journalists. Israeli war in Gaza is best reported by Israelis. The condition of Palestinians in Gaza is best reported by Palestinian journalists. Where do you draw the line? And what is troubling in the Manipur case is that the parachute journalism case is being made by local journalists from Imphal, whose reports themselves are being questioned for being biased.
Well, I know where it is coming from. I completely understand where you're saying. But having said that, but one also need to appreciate that Ukraine or Gaza, you have millions of books to read about. You have an understanding of the dynamics, whereas Manipur is more or less a hidden conflict. And what are the layers and layers of trauma which is triggering this kind of very violent conflict, to my understanding, requires a certain level of sinking in, you know. I mean, to be very honest, when I come to Delhi and try to understand Delhi, it takes a long time for me to sink in because it's a very different context. Similarly, I mean, the general feeling, I mean, I may be wrong, but the feeling in the people of Manipur, why they are reacting again, the way they are reacting is there is too quick to respond. And there are certain default position which is there in the liberal thinking in India, and there is a feeling that too soon conclusions are drawn because this is seen as a tribal, non-tribal, Christian, Hindu, or Valley majority, minority, and therefore the conclusions were drawn a little too quickly without understanding the traumas of the Meitei. That was the grouse. So a little bit of deeper understanding of the Meiteis are also a traumatized lot, looks themselves as an oppressed community, and somehow there was not an appreciation of that lived experience of the Meitei and put them as a majoritarian and I mean, Meiteis themselves are suffering and struggling within the whole power structure, and the whole very repressive regime which has come in has had I mean strong repression against among the Meitei, and also the way certain sections of the Meiteis are targeted have not been highlighted strong enough. So I think that is where the anxiety or the stress or the misunderstanding, so to speak, is coming from.
Thank you.
I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong, but I'm trying to understand where it is coming from. Yeah.
Okay. So, Samantha, I can read the next question, I presume. It's from Ayushi Malik to Jayanto Roy Chaudhary. She's asking you, taking the account of state media from Imphal, mostly Meiteis, and their influence over information compared to cookies or journalists who are very few in numbers, and Assam Rifles, which gives the official army version. How would you rate the success of reaching neutrality and a factual narrative in your reportage? And where can she read your reportage?
There's one more, Bharat, also to Jayantoda. I think we can club it together. This is from Ayush Mazumdar, who asks, can the symbols used by ethnic groups to identify each other be appropriated as a means of political mobilization in the long run for further ethnic animosity? Does media play a normative role vis-a-vis those symbols of ethnic difference in the context of biased coverage as stated by various speakers? So both questions to Jayantoda.
Jayant, are you there?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, problem with the mute button. I mean, they are both very interesting questions. Yes, I would say that we did a reasonably good job in getting to some kind of a neutral reportage, taking both Meiteis and Kukizo journalists' inputs, as well as that of the official version, which was actually the Assam Rifles and not really the Manipur police or the Manipur government, who were mostly missing. I mean, their reportage or their versions were usually what the reportage out of Imphal was coming. Plus, of course, we did parachute in journalists from both Calcutta and Guwahati. They did a good job in their own. I think we did a reasonably good job, but still, obviously, there can always be a better job that could have been done. If possibly we had been able to post someone from before or even for the entire period of the conflict, then maybe it would have been a slightly better job. But still, given it was a good job, especially because PTI also tried to not use ethnic identifiers or markers while reporting, though that did cause a little bit of confusion at times. But we tried to avoid it as much as possible, so that there were no repercussions. There weren't, it did not escalate matters. We would say a village in the valley was attacked, or a village in the hills was attacked, instead of saying a Kuki village was attacked or a Meitei village was attacked. But in some stories, of course, we made we had to come up with the identification markers, like the Paitei Weng locality in Imphal, which was totally gutted out, almost much of it, and most people had to leave. They're forced to leave. There were, of course, that entire story, how it happened the night of the broken glass. That story we had to report in detail, and we could not leave out the identity markers. Now, the next question, Ayush, is about identity markers. Basically, I guess he means identity markers are not really symbols only. Can they be appropriated as a means of political mobilization? They have already been appropriated, I think. Actually, there has been for a long time in Manipur this entire thing of coming out and groups using these aluminum or steel neon lights or whatever. They will beat on them. There's it's a symbol, it's a signal that everybody should come out and you should congregate. There's something happening. So this was done, for instance, in the Paitei Weng incident, where the Paiteis were all attacked. So a group of people came, they burned tires, and they started beating on these, these neon light poles, and people started coming out. They gathered, and after that, the attack happened. So this has been appropriated, and will it be used by political parties? Maybe it's accused in the ethnic conflict. Their own was by the political parties also. One cannot really comment on that. One cannot forecast how it will play out. So Does media play a normative role vis-a-vis those symbols of ethnic? Well, we have to report it, but I can't say whether reportage played the role of a normative. I mean, I really can't say that at this stage. That's about it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I have two specific questions and one general question for the entire panel. Bablu, you actually talked about something called the protection gap, and I was very intrigued by the fact that there seems to be some kind of a correlation that being established, which is quite true, that there is a lack of institutional mechanism. So I'm just curious to know that given the fact that it has a long border where there is high crossover and mobility, and that's always been there historically, would you like to say something a little more about the civil society-based or community-based intervention that is probably facilitating or providing some kind of aid in that process, and whether there are some kind of highlights of this kind of reportage in the dailies itself? Second question is for Zia. You made a very intriguing comment that Urdu dailies are not representing certain things. And I'm just curious why that is the case. Is it the general apathy towards, or is it because of fatigue factor? Either way, I know Zia is not there, so if Tahir Saab can respond to that, it would really be interesting. My third question is for the entire panel is, when you're reporting, what is the traction? Is it depth, or is it the event while it is unfolding? I'll call it a naive question, but it's just something to do with the fact that death has a particular kind of a persona, while we have survivor stories. So I'm just curious whether it is ethnic conflict or shock mobility or shock migration. What is it that, and I know Bharat has responded to this on numerous occasions, that it's about the editor and everything, but while you're the field, what is it that is really doing the game? Thank you.
So Bablu, the first question was to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think, the institutional gap is appalling. Tomorrow, just imagine India government says that we don't have resources to do the immigration in Indira Gandhi International Airport. Within a week, Delhi will be in chaos. So, but this is the situation in these border, more than 1,700 kilometer long border for the last 70 years. I think the chaos is coming too late now. It should have come long time ago in 1940s itself. I think it requires a very careful border management, also precisely because this has been always a free movement area, to ensure that people do not get into electoral roles. If refugees are going to come so regularly from 1942 onwards, at least by now it is time that there is an institution established on how to deal with the refugee. There's absolutely none. I think what Mizoram is showing is a good example of how, with little resource, even a school headmaster is identified as a nodal officer who will keep a record of who all are coming, who all are going. Even in Manipur, actually, before the whole narrative is poisoned, when these people first came, the Citizens Committee Manipur actually was organizing relief for all this Myanmar refugee which was coming. And I was very much a part of it. And even college-going students give their pocket money and clothes to help the refugee. There was a genuine, warm response from the Manipuri people initially. But slowly over the years, this has been poisoned now. And even lawyers who are representing this Burmese refugee are now being vandalized. 2 of my colleagues' house was vandalized for this. So there is, naturally, a response from the civil society which is humane. This is what happened in 88 as well. But this time round, there is a systematic poisoning. And we think this is coming from very powerful quarters. And this has created a big havoc. I would suggest that, in fact, this whole border needs to be, perhaps we need to set up a competent commission to look and give proper recommendation and suggestion, studying ground situation. What is the best way to deal with it? Now they are coming out with kind of fencing the border. This is a very ad hoc, and it is never going to completely divide the societies. I think it requires a proper commission that the government of India should set up to see how this this kind of intermingling of entering into electoral role needs to be stopped, but at the same time, the mobility, because the communities are so connected, needs to be facilitated. And how do you make a balance? I won't be able to say it offhand, but it requires, I think, a very serious attention, because India is also doing this look east policy, and more, as the roads improve, the possibility of people moving is going to be higher, and not to have proper institution in place is a big mistake. If I have the thing, we have already written to the Union Home Secretary. Either you establish an FRRO office in these areas, or allow UNHCR to come and operate in these areas. You delegate the work to UNHCR, and everybody has to go to Delhi to even make a registration. 2,000 kilometers is a complete nonsense in terms of protection. So I think this requires, not just the firefighting of dealing with the here and now crisis, human crisis, but there is a systemic gap, and that needs to be filled up in terms of by involving expertise, surveying the area, and I think it requires a proper policy formulation on how to deal with this very sensitive border.
Thank you, Bablu. Tahir Sahab, will you take that question about the Urdu press not being sensitized in covering refugees in Pakistan and the reasons for it? Nasreen's final question.
Yeah, maybe we'll just send the question to Tahir Khan Sahab and Zia later, and then Nasreen's final question can be taken up.
Anybody wants to take up Nasreen's question? Nasreen, would you like to repeat the question so that people
I can have the question for you, Bharat. It's about, what really tickles the media. Is it death or is it the journey itself? I know the answer tentatively, but I'm just curious, what is it? Because we are discussing, various kinds of stories here. And of course, in the context of, Manipur, Mizoram, entire, the whole ethnic conflict itself. But in terms of whether it is peace or conflict, so what is the traction for any kind of rapportage? Okay, Tahir Sahib has just joined us. That's okay.
So I'll concede the floor to Tahir Sahib first and come back to this later. Tahir Sahib, there was a question for you about the Urdu media, the reasons why the Urdu media in Pakistan is not sensitized to covering refugees. What are the reasons for it? And is the English language media better sensitized? And if so, what are the reasons for that?
Thank you for inviting me and asking this question. I would say that the Urdu media mainly now follow what the government or the security establishment tells them, are just any decision by the security establishment and the current caretaker government. So the whole up, you can say, the Urdu media, electronic media, and also print media, they mostly follow the state policy, and they don't want to annoy the security establishment, also the this government. Even in English media, I would say only I have read some stories or some articles, even the editorials of Dawn that was a little bit what we can say critical at the government decision to deport Afghans, million of Afghans, and it is very unfortunate that the focus of the Pakistani media, it may be other countries also, the focus is on the political issues and not in this issue. Although it was a very big decision for Pakistan to ask around 1.7 million Afghans to leave Pakistan in a short span of time. So this was unfortunate, and there is no doubt that the Urdu media in Pakistan, because mostly people read newspapers, although print media is not, maybe other countries also, not very strong now, but the Urdu TV channels also, they, I would say, they did not highlight the humane angle of this issue or the human rights problem. No, they did not focus on this. What these people, if you report them, what they will do in Afghanistan, whether the Taliban government have resources that could give them space or food or education, health facility. Because daily the Taliban government send us the figures across the border in Torkham and Chaman. These are the two major crossing points between the two countries. For example, if 200 families go today, so almost more than half, they stay in the tents they established near the border, and very few people go to their homes, because majority of these people who have been who are now going to Afghanistan, they came here to Pakistan after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. So these are the refugees of 1980s, and majority don't have the houses there, because if you are living in Pakistan, you have been living in Pakistan for 40 or 43 years, you have lost everything there. So this is unfortunate. The Urdu media did not highlight about this decision, but almost all, everyone is saying this is right decision. They should have taken earlier. So mainly they are following the government line.
So is it that the Urdu media is more nationalist in quotes than the English media, because your English media is very liberal and questions the government all the time?
Yes. If I reply very briefly, I would say the Urdu media has no direction. The Urdu media has lost its credibility in Pakistan, not only on this issue, which is a human issue, but also in local issues. They do not follow the ethics, I would say, the ethics of journalism. Because you are also aware what is happening in Pakistan on political front. So there are many recently audio leaks about Imran Khan, or like I would say the recent example of the husband of the former prime minister wife. So there was no response or no reaction from the Imran Khan side. And only the former husband spoke after 4 years of the divorce. So this is the problem in Pakistan, that the Urdu media doesn't care about the credibility, doesn't about the ethics of journalism. And this is unfortunate in Pakistan, that now the media owners in Pakistan, they are businessmen.
Yeah.
Any new TV channel is owned by the business. I don't know in India, in Sri Lanka, Nepal, other South Asian countries, but I would say in Islamabad, especially property dealers. Whenever you ask the new TV channel, the owner property dealer, or they will be having oil factory like this. So this is unfortunate. If an owner is a businessman, he doesn't have any interest in ethics, in human rights issue, in credibility. So this is the problem.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if it gives you any satisfaction, the loss of credibility in India is total, both for vernacular media as well as English media. There's no distinction between Hindi media and English media and so on and so forth. Nasreen, to your question, I would much rather first ask Jayanta to address it. What tickles the editors and the readers? Human interest stories or deeper stories? Jayanta. It's gone, I think. Huh? He's probably left. Okay,
No,
so
he's having some connectivity issue, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so if I answer that question, I would say both. There's place for both in the media. Human rights, human interest stories. They do attract the readers. But if you look at the popularity of explainers and backgrounders, they're also exceptionally popular, provided they're written by experts. So you look at the Indian Express full pager every day called Explained. I can lay a bet it's read more than the editorial page because it's full of information. But the trouble with the deep dive stories on whether it's on refugees or any other subject is that there is no expertise left in the newsrooms. So if these deep dive stories are written by experts, researchers, people from CRG or similar institutions, and written in a manner that's accessible, they also have a wide readership. I don't think it's an either or choice, that either you do the human interest stories, and human interest stories incidentally don't have to be flaky. They can also contextualize the voices of the displaced people in a manner that is both informative and as well as interesting to the reader. So there's space for both. And a good editor will sort of intersperse human interest stories with explainers and backgrounders as well. So I have a question for Som Narula. Som, you had said that there is no sympathy in the media for refugees. Now, I can understand in quotes, if the Hindu majority of Nepal has no sympathy for Rohingya refugees coming in. They don't know who the hell Rohingyas are. They have no border with Myanmar, etc. But why would they not have any sympathy for those refugees who've been displaced by the Maoist violence?
Yeah, thank you, Vasu. I think that's very, very interesting, ways to see refugees. I think the different kind of treatment based on the origin and places also. Completely, like if you see a Tibetan refugees who have different kind of treatment, and also Bhutanese refugees a different kind of treatment they got, and the Rohingyas they came and they are not considered as refugees itself also, right? So means there is no humanitarian assistance to them at all, and either the UNHCR is also getting registered to them. So basically they arrived here, they rented a place, and they are living here. Only the government is not sending back to them. So I think they got a very temporary kind of protections, but without any humanitarian assistance, and neither education, health, and other issues. So it's holding people without any responsibility, and different kind of arrangement and treatment among the displaced refugees. A conflict is, I think, that little different. There's some kind of the but in terms of the continuation of the assistance, support and help in after 2008, there is no continuous policy or support program to internally displaced persons. The government developed a policies to address the internal displacement in 2007, and that policy has not been continued. It has been one time it evolved it. After that, it has not been updated and continued. So it's kind of ad hoc support, but the problem is it continues, right? In terms of displacement, like by climate or disasters or any other aspects. The response mechanism are not in place to address the needs of the internally displaced persons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question from Jyotika Biswas to everyone in the panel. She says, India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, whereas India has been the receiver of huge number of refugees from neighboring countries. In this context, don't you think it is high time for India to make clear, updated and convenient rules and regulations regarding refugee citizenship and nationality, as the notion of nation state is interconnected with strong community feelings? Don't you think the media should play a strong role in this case instead of just reporting numbers of refugees? So any one of you can take it up. Bablu?
I am happy to take that up. Well, Yeah, there has been several attempts to write a legislation, a refugee legislation, starting from Justice Bhagavati almost 30 years ago. Now, even there is a parliamentary committee headed by our Shashi Tharoor, who's working on it. Unfortunately, it is never a priority because they are not in part of the electorates. If they were part of the electorates, they would have been a political priority. So this is a low priority. But India is part of the international consortium on refugee, and also the largest urban refugee population is in India, and it is also receiving a lot of international aid all around this. I would definitely agree that there are many specific recommendations from the Universal Periodic Review that India should ratify the Refugee Convention. So I think it would be good if the media also get its weight to this debate and the need for India as a mother of democracy and as the leader of the democratic world, G20 presidency, that you should treat people the way it is. And also, there's a lot of ambivalence from the Supreme Court. That is another issue. Whereas the Manipur High Court was very emphatic, saying that principle of non-reforma should be should be read as a right to life under the Constitution of India. Constitution of India protects right to life of every person, not just the citizen, and this definitely includes the asylum seekers as well. Unfortunately, that judgment is stayed now, so it is no longer the law. But we can also, I think, media need to also do a little more advocacy for the Supreme Court to come out with a clear enunciation of this very, very important issue. I am completely with it that media need to be more proactive in this advocacy role as well.
Bablu, just to follow this up, in the absence of a clear policy on refugees, so is Government of India's policy completely ad hoc? For example, the Tibetans are extremely welcome in India.
Exactly.
75,000 there. But 40,000 Rohingyas are seen as a security threat. Both
Exactly.
are displaced people because of shock mobility because of conflicts.
Exactly, Bharat. The idea is that India treats refugee according to its geopolitical calculus, not because they are refugee and requires a humanitarian. The base should be the humanitarian approach of a liberal democracy like India, which I don't know whether how liberal and how democratic it is, but we as a democracy needs to give our commitment on humanitarian consideration. I mean, it is slightly bigger, but the point that you mentioned about how Mizos are also treating the Mizos because of ethnic calculation, Indian state also is looking at a specific population according to the geopolitical calculus, and Tibet being politically very important has a favored treatment. So the way they treat Sri Lankan Tamils or the Hindu from Pakistan are very, very case specific. And Burmese, in that sense, are totally ignored. In fact, Burmese refugee are the only refugee which is not directly dealt by the Union Home Ministry, even though they are immediate neighbors. This is handed over to the UNHCR like any other non-neighboring countries. So I think there has to be a uniform way of treating from humanitarian and human rights consideration. And there is enough material to write upon it. And I think it needs to be brought in the popular consciousness. Since they don't have a franchise, right of franchise, it is important that the media has to play this role.
Thank you, Bablu. So are there any more questions? None? Okay, so thank you very much. This has been a great discussion. The panelists have made a lot of recommendations. I'm not going to list all of them, but what I would like to say at the end, if we have 2 minutes, Samata, is that my experience is that media focuses on law, legislation, policy, or the lack of it, not in great depth, but at a political level, at the level of just mentioning it, bowing towards them in their reportage. And what we really need to do is address the impact of these policies, as Bablu was saying, ad hoc or more well thought out, on the displaced people. What is the impact on these people who are displaced because of conflict? The There was some mention of direct voices of the displaced people need to be heard in the media. They are, occasionally they are heard. But what we need is, within that also, we need to hear the voices of women refugees. For example, in Manipur, Bablu would bear me out, there was a refugee camp just for pregnant women. These were in Imphal. These were women who were expecting babies and suddenly had to rush out of Churachandpur. Their voices were not heard anywhere. Their problems, they were separated from their husbands and their families. So gendering the narrative is also, I think, important. And most importantly, I think we as media persons should be asking ourselves, are we contributing to public anxiety about displacement and refugees through our lack of contextualization and description of displaced persons? This is what Nasreen was hinting at. You know, how do we lend depth of understanding to the plight of people who moved because of conflict, who've been displaced because of conflict situations? Lastly, I think we need to be careful about a few things. Just a laundry list I made. One is media, as media persons, this is not for our panelists who are experts on migration, but for media persons, that we need to be careful about spreading xenophobic narratives. We saw this happening in Manipur, and I'm sure it's happened in other places as well. We should be careful about our reportage not dehumanizing the displaced people, depriving them of human quality, personalities, dignity. Some were engineers, some were drivers, they were skilled people before they were displaced. So they had distinct personalities. They're not just numbers. And we should be careful about not separating us and them through reports. You know, I was reading somewhere that most photographs of refugees are when they're being chased by the police, arguing with the authorities, long shots. You know, so they all create this impression of us and them. Also, we should be careful about stereotyping by creating or feeding into established narratives of the state. You know, Rohingyas are a security threat. They're a threat to themselves. They can't survive. You know, they can't get 2 square meals a day. How are they a security threat to India? Or an economic threat that they're taking away our jobs. The kind of jobs they do, most Indians will not do. You know, and marginalizing the refugees is, again, we should be careful about. By attributing to them certain values or certain morals. Like in Bangladesh, they will say, oh, these Rohingyas in Katupalang, they're all criminals. Their women are all into prostitution. They're drug dealers. They import yaba from, you know, not all of them do this. There might be a small, minuscule minority there, but don't use that narrative to generalize and in a manner that completely marginalizes the refugees. So the role of the media in portraying displaced people is even more important today as incidents of shock migration are going up. We keep on saying, our leaders say this is not the era of war, but yet we support war. And wars are taking place and ethnic conflicts are taking place under our very noses. You know, they don't have to happen in Europe. They're happening in our own countries. So I'm saying that don't do anything. The basic principle should be don't do anything that prevents the integration of the displaced people into mainstream society. They may not become citizens, but their integration at a social level is possible. So media reportage should be such that we do not become a hurdle to this. So we should really be a firewall against xenophobia and must not catalyze emotional hatred towards migrants, whether it's on the basis of religion, ethnicity, as outsiders, as an economic threat, or a security threat. With that summarizing, I thank all of you for attending this absolutely brilliant workshop with brilliant panelists and equally brilliant questions. Thank you very much on behalf of CRG and SAN-CDM. Samita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bharat. We just have to thank our partners, DW Academy, everyone who have joined us today, our panelists who agreed on really, really short notice. Also, Tahir Khan Sabji, you were brilliant, and also without any notice whatsoever. It is remarkable to see people who have been part of the network's activities over the last 2 years to keep on coming back to these platforms, these discussions. And that, I think, is showing that there is such a network across borders that's necessary, and hopefully we will manage to make it bigger and stronger. With that, thank you once again, and have a very good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.